guys, and welcome back to Reading Club. Today I'm going to read you Dirty Bertie, Fleas, Story 2, Dare. Chapter 1. Bertie's class had a new teacher. Mr. Weekly was young, pale and very nervous, with round glasses that made him look like a startled owl. He was standing in for Miss Boot while she was off sick. Bertie thought she probably had a sore throat from all that shouting she did. He sat at the back of the class whispering with Darren. They were playing the Dare game. They wouldn't have risked anything so dangerous if Miss Boot had been around. Miss Boot would see you even when her back was turned, but Mr. Weekly didn't shout or go purple in the face like Miss Boot. He hardly seemed to get cross at all. Darren had already dared Bertie to burp loudly, and Bertie had dared Darren to drop dead on the floor. Mr. Weekly had merely looked up from his book and asked them not to be silly. "So," said Bertie, "what's the dare?" "I'm thinking," said Darren. Darren never won the dare game because Bertie was daring enough to do anything. Darren had once dared him to shout "pants" in assembly, and Bertie had yelled it at the top of his voice. But this time he was going to think of something much harder. Something that even Bertie wouldn't dare to do. A smile slowly spread across his face. He had it. "Okay," he said, "I dare you to lock Mr. Weekly in the storeroom." Bertie gaped at him. "What?" "That's the dare," said Darren. "I did mine. Now it's your turn, unless you're chickening out." "Who says I'm chickening out?" said Bertie. Bertie glanced over at the storeroom. It was little more than a tiny cupboard which Miss Boot kept locked at all times. Bertie had been in there once to get some computer paper. It was stuffy and the light didn't work. He wondered if Mr. Weekly was scared of the dark. Still, a dare was a dare, and he wasn't about to back down. "All right," he said, "I'll do it." Bertie's chance came a few minutes later. Mr. Weekly took off his reading glasses and asked them to copy some questions into their workbooks. Bertie raised his hand. "Yes, what is it?" asked Mr. Weekly. I've run out of space in my workbook, sir," said Bertie. "Oh," said Mr. Weekly. What do you normally do?" "Miss Boot keeps new workbooks in the storeroom," said Bertie, pointing at the door. "The key is in the drawer." "Thank you," said Mr. Weekly, forgetting Bertie's name. "The rest of you carry on with your work." Mr. Weekly found the key and unlocked the storeroom door. He disappeared inside, leaving the door open and the key in the lock. Bertie could hear him rummaging on the shelves, looking for the workbooks. "Go on," whispered Darren, "before he comes out." Bertie slid out of his seat and crept towards the door. One or two of the class looked up from their work. Bertie reached out a hand. Slam! The door swung shut. Click! The key turned in the lock. "Oh!" cried Mr. Weekly from inside. "What's happening?" Bertie pocketed the key and turned to Darren in triumph. The class was all staring at him, open-mouthed. "You've locked him in," said Darren. "I know," grinned Bertie. "That was the dare." "Yeah, but I didn't think you'd actually do it. What are you going to do now?" asked Darren. Bertie's grin faded. He hadn't really thought that far ahead. He supposed Mr. Weekly might be a bit cross. More than a bit, in fact. If he'd locked Miss Boot in the storeroom, she would have snorted like a mad bull. "You're for it," said Donor. "He's going to kill you," said Noel Nick. "No, he isn't," said Bertie. "How does he know it was me?" Chapter 2. Thump, thump. Mr. Weekly was knocking on the door. "Children," he pleaded, "really, this isn't funny. I'm going to count to 3. He counted to 3. 1, 2, 3. Nothing happened. Eugene looked anxious. "We can't just leave him there," he said. "You let it out then," said Darren. "I'm not getting into trouble." "Why me?" said Eugene. "I didn't lock him in. Bertie did." They all turned to look at Bertie, who had crossed Mr. Weekly's desk. He had always wondered what it would be like to sit in the teacher's chair. He picked up Mr. Weekly's reading glasses and put them on. He added Mr. Weekly's jacket. "Too much chatter," he said sternly. "Get on with your work." "You look like a teacher," giggled Donor. I am a teacher, said Bertie. I'm a very strict teacher, and you will all be staying in at playtime if you don't behave. The class laughed. Bertie sounded like Miss Boot in a bad mood. He peered at them over his glasses. Who made that poem? He demanded. Nick, was that you? The class howled with laughter. Noel Nick turned scarlet. You wait. You're in so much trouble, he said. When Miss Skinner finds out, she'll go up the wall. Bertie hadn't thought of Miss Skinner. The head teacher had a nasty habit of looking in on class unexpectedly. If Miss Skinner found out he'd locked Mr. Weekly in the storeroom, there'd be trouble. The thumps were getting louder. Bertie eyed the door. Maybe he should unlock it. If he moved fast, he could be back in his seat before Mr. Weekly got free. He felt in his pocket. He plunged his hands in deeper. A look of horror crossed his face. It's gone, he said. I've lost the key. Ha ha, said Darren. Come on, Bertie, stop messing around. I'm not messing around. I put it in my pocket just now. Bertie turned out his pocket and saw the small hole in the lining. The key must have slipped through and fallen out. What if he can find it? What if Mr. Weekly was locked in the storeroom forever? Don't just stand here, he cried. Help me look. Bertie, Darren and Donna got down on their hands and knees to search the floor. Noel Nick leaned back in his chair, smiling. I told you, he jeered. You are in so much trouble, Bertie. Eugene had been keeping watch at the window. Hurry up, he warned. Someone's coming. What? Said Bertie. A class crowded at the window to look. A woman with wild red hair was standing possibly across the courtyard toward them. Oh, her, said Noel Nick. She's the school inspector. Miss Skinner said she was coming today. Inspector, said Bertie, horrified. What's she inspecting? Our school wants you listening in assembly. I expect she wants to inspect Mr. Weekly. They all looked at the storeroom door. Mr. Weekly was rattling on the handle. We've got to get him out, said Bertie, starting to panic. We, said Noel Nick. You locked him in there. You get him out. But I can't find the key, moaned Bertie. Do something, cried Eugene. She's coming up the stairs. Wait, I've got an idea, said Donna. Bertie can pretend he's our teacher. What? Said Bertie. Pretend to be Mr. Weekly. You're wearing his jacket in classes. Just say you're him. Are you crazy? Said Bertie. She'll know I'm not him. No, she won't. She's probably never met him. All you have to do is sit at a desk and act like a teacher. You can do it. Yeah, said Darren. I dare you. Bertie shot Darren a look, but maybe Donna was right. He was always doing impressions of Miss Boot, so why couldn't he be Mr. Weekly? In any case, he didn't have a better idea. He sat down at the teacher's desk. The class were all out of their seats, miling around like lost sheep. Well, sit down, cried Bertie. Look as if you're working. Everyone ran to their desks and sat down. Even Noel Nick did as he was told. Bertie was amazed at his own power. He gave an order and everyone obeyed him. So this was what it like to be a teacher. Chapter 3. Miss Barker knocked on the classroom door and entered. She had heard scuffling as she approached, but now the class all seemed to be working quietly. A scruffy boy sat at the teacher's desk in a jacket that was far too big for him. Good morning. My name is Miss Barker, she said. Where is your teacher? Yes, good morning, replied Bertie. I am the teacher. Don't be ridiculous, snapped Miss Barker. Where is Mr. Weekly? Yes, Mr. Weekly, that's my name, nodded Bertie, his glasses sliding down his nose. He pushed them back up again. Miss Barker peered down at the boy. Teachers seemed to be getting younger and younger these days, but this was absurd. This one hardly looked any older than the rest of the class. When she'd first entered the room, she could have sworn she had a finger up his nose. How old are you? She demanded. 17, said Bertie, correcting himself quickly. 17? That's far too young to be a teacher. Yes, said Bertie. It is for a normal teacher, but it's 'cause I'm more clever than normal." "More clever," repeated Miss Barker. "Yes," said Bertie. "I used to get 10 out of 10 at school all the time. So in the end they said I just ought to get on and start teaching." Miss Barker was about to reply, but she was interrupted by a strange knocking sound. "What's that noise?" she said. "What noise?" asked Bertie. "That banging noise." "Oh, that," said Bertie. "That's just Miss Todd teaching next door. She gets a bit cross sometimes, and she starts banging on the walls and things." "Banging on the walls? Good heavens," said Miss Barker. She made a note in a black file and turned to Bertie. "Well," she said, "if you really are Mr. Weekly, you better get on with the lesson." "What?" said Bertie. The lesson you're teaching." "Oh, yes, that," said Bertie. He gulped and put his glasses back up his nose. Miss Barker's face had gone all blurry. She seemed to be waiting for him to start. But what could he teach? He knew a lot about fleas. Maybe he should draw some fleas on the board. The banging from the storeroom started up again. He had to do something to drown out the noise. "Maths," he said, practically shouting. "We were just going to do a few sums." The class stared at him blankly, all except Darren, who was pulling faces at him from the back row. "Darren," said Bertie. "Yes?" "Stand up," said Bertie. Darren stood up. "What is 2 plus 2? asked Bertie. Darren thought for a moment. 4, he said. "Very good. Sit down," said Bertie. "Eugene?" "Yes, Bertie." "Yes, sir," said Eugene, standing up. "What are 3 2s, Eugene?" "6, squeaked Eugene. "Very good," said Bertie. "Nick?" Noel Nick got to his feet. "Miss Barker," he began, but Bertie caught him off. "Pay attention, Nick. What is 2,740 times 7 million? Noel Nick's mouth dropped open. Come on, said Bertie, enjoying himself. "I haven't got all day, you know." I don't know, stammered Noel Nick. Bertie peered over his glasses. "Nick, extra homework for you tonight." Chapter 4. Thump, thump, thump. The banging from the storeroom was deafening. "Help!" cried Mr. Weekly. "Can anyone hear me?" Miss Barker stood up. "There's someone behind that door," she said. "No, I don't think so," mumbled Bertie. "Let me out, please," begged Mr. Weekly. "There is someone in there," said Miss Barker. "I can hear them shouting." Bertie's heart sank. Miss Barker hurried over to the storeroom and spoke through the door. "Hello." "Hello," replied Mr. Weekly. "Thank heavens. Who's that?" "This is Miss Barker, the school inspector." "Oh dear," said Mr. Weekly in a faint voice. "What are you doing in there?" "I'm locked in," said Mr. Weekly. "I came in to get a book, and the door shut, and now I'm locked in." "Wait there," said the inspector. "I'm going to fetch a teacher." "I am a teacher," said Mr. Weekly. "I'm Mr. Weekly." Miss Barker looked puzzled. "But I thought Mr. Weekly is right here." She turned back to the teacher's desk, but there was no sign of the scruffy boy she had been talking to, only a pair of glasses and a crumpled jacket that lay on his chair. Bertie had seized his chance to escape. He had enough of teaching for today. As he slid into his place, he felt something sharp in his pocket. He pulled it out and stared at the silver key in surprise. "Look," he whispered to Darren. "It was in my other pocket all the time." Noel Nick had turned around in his seat. He raised his hand in the air. Miss Barker, he said. "Bertie's got something to show you." The next day, Miss Boot was back. "Let's begin with art," she said, with a gleam in her eyes. "We'll need bruises, brushes, and powder paints. Bertie, perhaps you'd like to fetch them from the storeroom?" Bertie turned pale. He suddenly didn't feel well. "Me?" That's the end of this channel. If you liked it, please click many likes and subscribe to Reading Club. I'll come back later with a new and improved channel. Bye, guys!